I can rewrite the story.
Loki episode 5 season 2 was more like a filler episode which had just 2 to 3 things to do and give some credibility to certain things, which we'll talk about later in this video. It was much like the second episode that we saw, very easy to follow but still packing a lot of details, which we'll talk about later in this video as well. But apart from all of this, there are still some questions that needs answers for. There are still some contradicting theories which sort of answered themselves at the end of this episode, but still it gave way for more questions. Anyways, let's start with this episode. We open right where we left off in the 4th episode, where Loki shuts his eyes and we assume that the entire TVA and everything, for a matter of fact, exploded. But here is a twist. When Loki opens his eyes, he is all alone, and in the background we can see that the temporal loom has managed to bring back some timelines together, and this is really interesting. As we predicted in these 2 episodes, every employee of the TVA has gone back to their timelines. In fact, the timeline has been reset. But here is a twist too, but we'll come back to this very point later in this video. I think I've said that 3 times already. As we go further in this episode, we learn that the TVA has entered fail-safe mode.
TVA code 1229, fail-safe mode initiated.
Which is to destroy itself essentially, but I presume keeping some timelines which the temporal loom can handle intact. But what about other timelines? Gone. Loki then time slips into a different timeline for almost half of the episode, and we learn what his friends actually did. Starting off with Casey, his real name is Frank and he is a criminal. He steals. It's 1962 and he was trying to escape a prison in California, which says he is very resourceful. But here is the interesting bit. We see him in the branch timeline, not in the sacred timeline. In fact, we see everyone in this episode in the branch timeline itself. Now this is what I think happened. As we have been predicting for very long, and we know this for a fact as well, that every TVA employee was actually a variant at first, who by no intention created a branch timeline from the sacred timeline, and their branch reality was going to be pruned anyway, so they were picked up by He Who Remains and brought into the TVA as an employee. But still, they had a life, didn't they? Hunter B-15, real name Dr. Willis, year 2012, New York. I wonder if this was before Loki's attack on New York, because she seems not to recognize Loki at all. Or in the branch timeline, the attack on New York simply did not happen. Who knows? Mobius, a jet ski salesperson. I was so happy to see him. I was so very happy to see him. So his real name is Don, and as we predicted in this video, he has 2 kids, 2 boys.
Kevin, get... Sean, go get him. Come on, hurry. And if you keep him from burning down the house, I'll get you a puppy. Come on.
And the snake?
We'll negotiate later. Run.
Single parent, year 2022, Ohio. And I don't know if you noticed this, but this was actually a callback to the first season.
What else? A beautiful union of form and function.
Oh, that's lovely. Yeah. Shining moment. There was a beautiful union of form and function, which we call the jet ski.
At last, Obi. We don't catch his real name, but it's 1994. He is a writer of science fiction books, but by profession, he is a theoretical physicist at Caltech. But now here, remember how Obi says that he wrote the TVA handbook from an inventor back from the 19th century called as Victor Timely. But in this episode, it was Loki who gave him the TVA handbook. And this TVA handbook clearly says that it was written by whom? Obi. So this loop of who really wrote the TVA handbook and when did who wrote the TVA handbook is still a question. This loop is still an open loop. But what happened to Sylvie? Again, as we suspected, Sylvie did not have a timeline and she was not an employee. So I think when everything was exploding at the end of the 4th episode, she escaped using the temp pad and slipped into the timeline that she chose after she killed He Who Remains back at the end of the first season. As we go further, we start to get some answers finally. It was Loki's need for companionship that is driving him to bring back everyone and still save the TVA. Plus, every branch timeline is getting destroyed now, so they really don't have any option other than to save the TVA. And I loved how they ended the episode. A nice very twist at the very end. Loki learns how to control his time slipping, and this sets up the things for the final showdown. And again, as we suspected earlier in these 2 episodes, it is going to be Loki's time slipping that will save the TVA once and for all. So Loki will take back his friends where they actually belong, is to save the TVA, and definitely they will try different permutations and combinations of actions that will save the TVA, because they had hoped that different actions will turn into different result essentially for the TVA at the end. So over the course of this week, I will try and make different videos on the 5th episode, and also what more can we expect from the final episode of Loki season 2 and overall Loki. So make sure you check back, and while you're at it, please consider subscribing the channel because we are very close to hitting 1000 subscribers. Thank you so much for watching.